The AI landscape confusing. There are a lot of tools, there are different ways to deploy. If you're talking to someone who may be confused about it, what are some of the exciting areas in AI? What are some of the things people should be looking at right now in AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in general, AI is exciting. People who have invested in it early are seeing the returns and they're reinvesting their money. So people who haven't invested yet have the risk of being laggards, and when they eventually do invest, they're going to fall behind. Speaking to specific trends in AI, I think facial recognition is something that gets a lot of press coverage. And recently in the media, there were stories about how China is using facial recognition and has a database of 2 billion people, where when they walk around, they can identify who you are and build a profile on you based on where you've been. Just to give some context on how that works, people don't have to opt into that. The technology can see, essentially coordinates on your face that create an eye, and they're unique to you, and they can then spot you walking around. It's the same type of technology that Facebook uses when it identifies, you're in a photo with your friends. So there's lots of ethical issues that are raised based on facial recognition technology. It really brings to the forefront ethics, consent, use of data, so that's a big hot topic. There's also a potential for misuse. There's something called deep faking, where you can use all your knowledge about how someone speaks and how they look and create fake videos. So you could create a video of Barack Obama saying that he likes Trump because you figured out exactly how he speaks, and there's a potential for a lot of fake news and manipulation of data going forward. So it just raises larger concerns. Besides facial recognition, something else of interest is automation of jobs and mundane processes. So one example of that is driverless cars. So there's lots of industries where there's rules-based ways of doing a job. There's street signs, and you're supposed to follow them and follow turn signals. I can't describe driving very well. I'm from New York, so I'm not very good at it myself. But you get the point. But a machine will be able to do that shortly, so I don't have to learn. But jobs like that are going to be increasingly automated, or fast food, flipping a burger. You can automate that by understanding how humans do it and then having a machine replicate that. So that brings about concerns, where our workforce is going to be in 10 years, 20 years, how we have to change wages. So there's lots of interesting areas in AI that, really impact our society, and we should be thinking about that.
Josh, Sam, do you have any additions to that? Any other, from your experience, any other hot topics?
Yeah, I think a lot of things, when you think of the value of what machine learning can give to businesses, to customers, to people who use this stuff, I think that sometimes at this moment there's sometimes a lot of magical thinking about it, and I think this kind of goes back a little bit to what you were saying, sort of the idea that we don't yet know the physics of these metaphorical buildings that we're making. And sometimes we overreach, right? So that sometimes it's sort of like we want the thing to give us the answer or to replace the human task. And I think at this point, what we're sort of seeing, what I've been seeing, is sort of trying to create products around this stuff, working with my colleagues who are the data scientists, who are building the neural networks and the models of this, is that a lot of times you can't rely on the thing to give a consistent answer. And in fact, these things are maybe better in a way at giving signals rather than answers, which means that they're actually great partners with human beings. And just as an example of that, you look at the sort of studies around image recognition, sort of straightforward, now kind of common mainstream machine learning application. And what you see is a lot of these systems constantly hallucinate things that aren't in the image, right? And you must see this a lot with video, right? The idea is that it's useful to realize that the machines don't see things or understand things or logic through things the way that we do, and it's easy to assume that they do. But really, for image recognition, for example, they're just sort of associating patterns that they see with a concept that looks like this. So it could be food on a plate, and they see things of food on a plate, but they will say it's food on a plate with a fork. even though there's no fork in the image, right? Because they have associated this concept. And so all to say is that I think that as we sort of think about what the applications for these things are, one of the most important things to understand about the texture of this design material of machine learning is that it is weird. The machines come up with weird stuff all the time. They misunderstand us constantly. They make assumptions that we would not make. And in a moment I'll talk about that. That's actually one of the useful things about them, is that sort of creative friction that they can create. But we all sort of experience just talking to Alexa or Siri or Google Assistant that half the time the thing just doesn't get it, right? And this is sophisticated systems. But I think one of the things that I think is useful to think about this as a trend is the weirdness of these. And how do you create products around that? As a designer, most of my history has been crafting behaviors and paths through information that is under my control. And working with this, it's flipped on its head. Instead of designing for success, I'm designing for failure and uncertainty. And that's a new kind of thing. My job as a designer is always to shape expectations and shape behavior. But it's urgent in this case, especially when we're dealing with things like cars that are supposed to drive themselves, or systems that are supposed to do sentencing for prisoners, or choose who gets hired or who gets the loan. These are critical, right? So how do we protect against error and that weirdness? And so I think a lot of the job of this is now sort of really setting appropriate expectations and designing these products to encourage behavior on the part of the person using the system to actually map to what the system is capable of. So just as a quick example, with Siri and Alexa, as I mentioned before, the promise and expectation that they make is ask me anything. And they always disappoint us. As incredibly sophisticated as these systems are, the expectation that they set and the behavior they encourage is not correct to what the system can do. And so I think a lot of the stuff that we see right now is this sort of trial and error. Let's see what the technology can do, but it hasn't necessarily brought a very sort of, what I would say, sort of designerly sophistication for how do we educate people on how to use it? How do we educate people on how their data is being used? I'm sorry, I know I'm just rambling. Sorry. All right.
Well,